The second morning in the Carter mansion was still and polished, like a painting I wasn't allowed to touch. I woke earlier than usual, heart tugging against my ribs, because today wasn't just another day of quiet halls and hidden roles. Today, Mia was coming. My little sister, my shadow, my reason for breathing when everything else went dark. The guest room I'd been given, the one they called mine, but still felt borrowed, looked almost too perfect. The silk curtains had been drawn just enough to let in a stripe of gold light across the floor. Somewhere down the corridor, I could hear the faint rhythm of someone's shoes against marble. Even the air smelled rehearsed, like fresh polish and flowers that never wilted. I sat at the edge of the bed, clutching my phone in both hands. My thumb hovered over Mia's name. She doesn't even know what this place looks like, I thought. How do I explain to her that home now means chandeliers and locked doors instead of squeaky floors and chipped paint? But she was waiting. I typed, "I'm coming for you today. Thee ready. Bring your favorite books." Seconds later, the typing bubbles appeared. Mia, do they have pancakes? My laugh came out shaky. I typed back, "We'll make them. Together." I tucked the phone away and pressed my palms to my knees, trying to slow the drum of my pulse. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the house was already awake in its own quiet rhythm. A maid carried linens down one side corridor. A man in a suit, probably one of Ryan Carter's staff, spoke into a discreet earpiece as he passed. They all moved like gears in a clock that had been running long before I arrived and would keep running whether I fit in or not. At the bottom of the grand staircase, Mrs. Whittemore was waiting, clipboard in hand. She had the kind of posture that could correct a whole room without a word. "Miss James," she said with a small nod, "the driver is ready. Mr. Carter has cleared your absence until noon. Do not be late returning." There was no cruelty in her tone, just the kind of clipped professionalism that left no room for argument. "Yes, ma'am," I said softly. She studied me for a moment longer, then added, "The girls' room has been prepared. East wing, adjacent to yours. Neutral tones as requested." A breath loosened in my chest. "Thank you." She didn't answer, just turned briskly and walked away, her heels ticking against the marble like a metronome. The black sedan waiting outside gleamed in the pale morning sun, so polished it reflected the gates behind it. The driver, tall, stone-faced, with hands that never seemed to leave the steering wheel, opened the back door for me without a word. I slid into the leather seat and tried not to think about how many lives had been ferried in and out of this car. As the mansion gates swung open, I watched the world shift back into something familiar. Streets with potholes, the bakery with its crooked sign, houses pressed close like they needed each other. And then there it was, Miss Green's porch. Our porch for so long. My throat tightened. Before the car had even fully stopped, the front door banged open and Mia came bounding out, her backpack half-zipped, hair wild, and her smile brighter than anything marble or crystal could offer. "Elena!" I barely had time to step out before she threw herself into my arms, small arms wrapping around my neck, her weight both feather-light and grounding. "Bug," I whispered, holding her tight. "Oh, I missed you." "I missed you more," she said into my shoulder, voice muffled. Then she leaned back, eyes wide. "Is it true? Do we really get to live in a castle?" I laughed, brushing her hair back from her face. "Something like that. Come see for yourself." Behind her, Miss Green appeared at the door, smiling in that tired but kind way she always had. She held out Mia's small suitcase. "She's been up since dawn, couldn't stop talking about this adventure." "Thank you for everything," I said, my voice catching. She patted my arm. "You do what you need to, Elena. She's with you. That's what matters." I nodded, throat too tight for words, and guided Mia toward the car. She gasped as the driver took her suitcase with practiced precision. "Fancy," she whispered, eyes huge as she slid into the leather seat. I climbed in after her, and soon the city began to blur past again. Mia pressed her nose to the window, whispering little observations about every passing car and tree, until the world grew quieter and larger and greener. And then finally, the Carter mansion rose into view. Mia sat back, her eyes as wide as saucers. "Elena," she whispered, almost reverent, "it is a castle." I didn't correct her, because in that moment, it felt true. The car glided to a halt in the wide, circular drive. From here, the mansion looked even larger than it had when I first arrived yesterday. Its pale stone walls reaching upward, windows tall and symmetrical, the kind of building that seemed less like a home and more like a secret everyone was expected to protect. Mia's hand found mine before the driver had even stepped out. Her fingers were warm, sticky with excitement, and trembling just slightly. "Are you sure they know we're coming?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, squeezing back. "They know. This is our new beginning." Her brows scrunched together, skeptical. "But do they want us?" The question stung. I wanted to tell her, yes, absolutely, but the truth was heavier, complicated by contracts and signatures. "They need us," I said carefully, brushing a loose curl from her forehead. And that's a start. The driver opened the door and Mia tumbled out with a gasp. Her backpack slipped from her shoulder, bouncing on the gravel, but she didn't even notice. She was too busy staring at the tall columns, the glittering windows, the heavy double doors that looked like they could hold back a storm. "It really is a castle," she breathed. Inside, the foyer was just as overwhelming. The chandelier above caught the light, scattering it into fragments across the marble floor. Mia twirled in a slow circle, her reflection flashing 100 times in the polished surfaces. "Wow," she whispered. "Do you think they'll let us slide on the floor in our socks?" Her question cracked something warm inside me. "Maybe," I said softly, "but let's try walking first." Mrs. Whitmore appeared almost soundlessly from the side corridor, her clipboard cradled against her chest. Her sharp gaze landed on Mia, who froze mid-spin, suddenly self-conscious. "This must be your sister," Mrs. Whitmore said, voice clipped but not unkind. "Mia," I introduced, guiding her forward. "Mia, this is Mrs. Whitmore. She helps run the house." Mia extended a hand in a polite but awkward gesture I hadn't expected. "Hello." Mrs. Whitmore's brows lifted, just slightly, and she took the hand with surprising gentleness. "Welcome to Carter House, Mia. Your room is ready, if you'll follow me." We moved down the east corridor, our footsteps softened by the long rug. I recognized the hallway. I had walked it last night when I couldn't sleep, tracing the edges of my new world. When we reached the door beside mine, Mrs. Whitmore opened it with a small flourish. Here we are. The room was simple but elegant. A single bed pressed neatly against the far wall, covered in a pale quilt. A desk waited near the window, stacked with crisp blank notebooks. Built-in shelves lined one wall, half empty, ready to be filled. The light streaming through the window painted the whole space in gold. Mia's breath hitched. "This is mine?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "Yours." She darted across the room, touching everything, the quilt, the desk, the lamp on the nightstand. Finally, she flopped onto the bed, arms spread wide. "It's so soft! Elena, come try it!" I laughed and sat beside her, bouncing slightly on the mattress. "Not bad, huh?" She turned to me, eyes bright. "It feels like a dream." A quiet voice interrupted from the doorway. "I like your room too." We both turned. Sophie stood there, clutching her teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, by the paw. Her hair was brushed smooth today, and she wore a pale pink dress that looked like it had been chosen for her, not by her.
She was staring shyly at Mia. "Hi," Mia said immediately, sliding off the bed. "I'm Mia. Do you live here too?" Sophie nodded, hugging Mr. Buttons closer. "Yes, my uncle says it's my home." "Cool," Mia said brightly. "Do you want to see my books? I have fairy tales and adventure stories with maps in the front." Sophie's eyes flicked to me, hesitant, as if asking permission. I nodded softly. She stepped into the room, bare feet silent on the rug, and the two girls perched on the floor together, heads bent over Mia's worn stack of books. For a moment, everything felt normal. Two children discovering each other, trading stories and smiles. Mrs. Whitmore lingered only long enough to murmur, "Lunch is at noon, don't be late," before disappearing into the hall. I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed, letting the girls' voices weave a softer rhythm around the room. Mia's laughter bubbled up, light and familiar, while Sophie's came quieter, like it hadn't been used in a while. Watching them together, I felt the ache in my chest ease just a little. This is why we came. For her. For us. But then, almost against my will, my gaze drifted toward the door, toward the silence of the mansion beyond. Ryan Carter hadn't appeared yet, and somehow, even without his presence, his rules already felt heavy in the air. By the time Mia and Sophie had settled on their books, my nerves were already climbing. It wasn't the mansion that unsettled me, not its echoing halls or its endless polished surfaces. It was him, Ryan Carter. We hadn't seen him yet this morning, but the weight of his presence hung like a storm cloud over the house. His name had already slipped from Mrs. Whitmore's lips twice, once when she reminded us of the strict schedule, and again when she told me not to be late to the dining room. I made sure Mia's hair was smoothed and her dress neat. She wasn't used to this world of order and rules, but I wanted her first impression to be as close to perfect as possible. When we stepped into the dining room, my breath hitched. The table was absurdly long, stretching under a chandelier that glowed like a small sun. The place settings gleamed, crystal glasses, polished forks, napkins folded with the precision of origami. Mia slowed, wide-eyed, as if she had wandered into a fairy tale. And there, at the head of the table, sat Ryan. His presence was stark against all that shine. Black suit, crisp shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled back just enough to reveal a strong wrist vein standing in quiet defiance. His expression? Impenetrable. Eyes lowered to a tablet, unreadable behind the pale light of the screen. He didn't look up when we entered. Mia faltered, glancing at me. I gave her a small nod, guiding her to the chairs set halfway down the table. Sophie was already there, perched stiffly on her seat like a doll waiting for permission to move. We sat. The silence was immediate, broken only by the faint clink of Ryan scrolling on his device. Finally, he set it down. His gaze lifted, sharp and assessing, pinning us with the kind of attention that makes you forget how to breathe. "So," he said, voice smooth but cold, "this is your sister." Mia straightened in her chair, cheeks flushing. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice polite but small. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, so quick I might have imagined it. "Manners," he murmured, almost to himself. Then louder, "You'll find this house has rules. You'll learn them quickly." Mia swallowed hard. I reached under the table, squeezing her hand once. "Uncle?" Sophie whispered from her seat. "Mia showed me her book. It has a map." Ryan's attention shifted, softening by a fraction at the sight of Sophie's earnest face. But the moment didn't last. His expression hardened again, his gaze sweeping over the table as servers appeared from a side door, setting down trays of food. Eggs, toast, fruit. Dishes too fine for a weekday morning. Mia's eyes widened at the spread. I could practically hear her thoughts. Do we eat all of this? Ryan cleared his throat lightly. 8. The word dropped heavy in the air. Sophie obeyed instantly, spooning fruit onto her plate. Mia hesitated, unsure of which fork to use. Her fingers twitched toward the wrong one. Before I could guide her, Ryan's voice cut in, calm but exact. The smaller fork, left side. Mia's hand froze. She glanced at him, then at me. I gave her an encouraging nod, and she adjusted. For the next several minutes, the room filled with the quiet sounds of cutlery and clinking glasses. Ryan didn't speak again, though I felt his gaze drift to us more than once, unreadable and calculating. Mia leaned closer to Sophie at one point, whispering about the strawberries. Sophie actually smiled, shy but genuine. That tiny flash of warmth between them was the only softness at the table, and I couldn't help but wonder, was that why Ryan had brought us here? For Sophie? For this? Or was it something else entirely? When the meal ended, Ryan pushed back his chair, the scrape of wood against marble echoing like a warning. He rose to his full height, commanding without effort. "Mrs. Whitmore will provide your schedules," he said, voice steady and distant. His eyes cut briefly to me. "See to it that your sister does not disrupt the order of this house." And with that he left. The door closed behind him, and the silence that followed was heavier than his presence had been. Mia whispered, almost inaudible, "He doesn't like us." I forced a smile, brushing her hair back gently. He doesn't know us yet. But deep inside, a chill spread, because the truth was, I wasn't sure if he ever wanted to. The next morning unfolded with the kind of quiet that only grand houses seem to have, the sort of silence that isn't empty, but watchful, as though the walls themselves are listening. I decided the girls needed fresh air. After the stiff breakfast and Ryan's lingering coldness, it felt necessary, like throwing open a window after being trapped in a stuffy room. "Mia! Sophie!" I called gently as they finished tidying their rooms. "How about a little exploring today?" Mia's eyes lit instantly. "Really? Like an adventure?" Sophie hesitated, glancing down the hall as if invisible eyes might catch her. But when Mia grinned at her, a small nod followed. Hand in hand, the two trailed after me, their chatter growing as we walked. The East Wing corridor gave way to wide staircases, marble banisters, and paintings whose subjects seemed ready to step down from their gilded frames. "This place is like a castle," Mia whispered. "Uncle Ryan's castle," Sophie corrected quietly, her tone without joy. The words tightened something in my chest. We reached the gardens first. The morning sun scattered light across manicured hedges and fountains that seemed to sing with falling water. A gardener in overalls tipped his cap politely before returning to trimming roses. Mia darted forward, inhaling dramatically. "It smells like perfume out here!" Sophie giggled, a rare sound, small but genuine. I froze a moment, committing that laugh to memory. The two ran ahead, their footsteps soft against the gravel. I followed slowly, letting their laughter ripple through the air. Watching them together, a warmth bloomed inside me, an image of what normal childhood might look like, free from grief, free from duty. Yet, even in that moment of joy, Ryan's presence pressed against the edges of my thoughts. He wasn't here, but I felt him anyway, like a cold draft in an otherwise sunny room. Later, inside, we wandered deeper into the mansion. The library's doors stood open, towering shelves lined with leather spines, the air thick with history. Mia gasped and pulled Sophie inside, marveling as if she'd stumbled into a secret treasure vault. "Look at this one!" Mia squealed, tugging a heavy atlas free. She flipped it open across a low table, tracing continents with her finger. "We can play travel!" Sophie watched her for a long moment, then sat down too. "My mom used to read me stories here," she whispered, almost reverently. "Before..." Her voice trailed off, her small shoulders shrinking. Mia leaned in, the weight of her own experience softening her. "It's okay," she said gently. "My mom, she's gone too. But my sister," she glanced at me, eyes bright with pride, "my sister takes care of me now." Sophie's lips curved just slightly, her hand creeping across the map to touch Mia's. I swallowed hard, turning away so they wouldn't see the sting in my eyes. It was then, standing among books and whispered truths, that Sophie murmured the words that would echo through me for the rest of the day. "Uncle Ryan doesn't smile anymore." The sentence hung like smoke in the air. I crouched beside them, brushing hair from Sophie's pale face. "Maybe he's just forgotten how. Sometimes people do that when they've been hurt." Sophie frowned. "But he should try. Smiles make things easier." Her innocence was a blade in my chest. She didn't understand the fortress Ryan had built around himself, or the grief he carried in silence. And maybe I didn't either. But I knew one thing. Sophie deserved more than a guardian who loved her only from behind walls. As the girls bent over their book again, giggling over imaginary voyages across oceans, I leaned back against a shelf, folding my arms. I was supposed to keep this professional, keep it about duty, but watching Sophie cling to Mia like a sister she'd always wanted, I realized something dangerous. This was no longer just a job. And if I wasn't careful, the line between caretaker and family would blur until it vanished completely. The days passed in a rhythm I hadn't expected. Not soft, exactly, but patterned, like the tick of an old clock. Morning lessons with Sophie, afternoons filled with Mia's chatter and books spread across the library tables. Evenings in the garden, fireflies flickering between hedges as the girls made up stories only they understood. I began to see it, the slow weaving of two lives together, Mia's brightness filling Sophie's quiet spaces, Sophie's gentleness grounding Mia's wild curiosity. Sometimes when I tucked them in, Sophie would whisper, "Good night, sister," and though Mia wasn't truly her sister, neither of them corrected it. Neither did I. The mansion itself began to soften in my eyes. At first, it had felt like a gilded cage, too perfect, too vast. But with the sound of their laughter and its halls, it almost breathed. Almost. Because there was still Ryan. I saw little of him during that first week. A shadow at the end of the hall, a voice carried on the phone in his office, a presence sweeping past us on his way out, polished shoes clicking against marble. He was there, but never with us, until one evening. The girls were in the sitting room, bent over a puzzle. Their giggles spilled through the door as I lingered in the corridor, watching them with quiet relief. For once, everything seemed peaceful. Then, I felt him before I saw him. Ryan stood at the far end of the hallway, broad shoulders squared, expression carved from stone. His gaze locked on me as he approached, each step measured, deliberate. I straightened instinctively, my pulse quickening. "Miss James." His voice was low, smooth, yet distant. A word. I followed him to the library, where the fire cast long shadows across the shelves. He didn't sit, didn't offer me a seat. He simply turned, his eyes colder than the marble floor beneath us. "You've settled in," he said. Not a question, an observation. "Yes," I managed. "The girls? They are children," he cut in, his tone sharp enough to slice. "And children adapt quickly. But let me be clear, Miss James." He stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the gravity of him, the weight of control he carried like a second skin. "Do not confuse adaptation with attachment. You are here to care for Sophie, nothing more. Your sister may stay, but this house is not a playground for sentiment. Keep your distance. Keep it professional." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, my chest heavy with unspoken anger, but I forced my voice steady. "With respect, Mr. Carter," I said quietly, "children need more than schedules and caretakers. They need—" His eyes flashed, silencing me. "They need stability, and stability comes from rules, not affection." The finality in his tone was a wall I couldn't climb. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or pain, but it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced with steel. He turned away, dismissing me as if I were just another employee. "That will be all." I stood frozen, words clawing at the back of my throat, but when I finally stepped out into the corridor, my knees were weaker than I cared to admit. From the sitting room came a burst of laughter. Mia's shrill and bright, Sophie's soft and shy. Their joy spilled into the empty hall, warming the cold air his presence left behind. And I knew then, Ryan Carter might rule this mansion with rules and silence, but I wasn't going to let them smother them. Not Mia, not Sophie, and maybe not even him.
I couldn't help but wonder if I had stepped into a life too big for me to hold together. 2 little girls depending on me, and a man who kept his heart locked tighter than the doors of his mansion. But this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring its own trials and its own secrets. And that wraps up episode 2 of The Billionaire's Caretaker. What do you think? Will Mia and Sophie ever become like sisters, or is the mansion too cold to feel like a home? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss episode 3. It's going to be even more intense.